When people think of the most important part of Toledo, Ohio, they might think of the Fifth Third building. Maybe they're going to think of somewhere else in the heart of downtown. Maybe they're going to think of the Jeep plant. Maybe they're going to think of ProMedica. Maybe they're going to think about the Metro Parks or the zoo or the Museum of Art. But consistently, throughout all of the city's history, the most important part of the city has been a part you've probably not thought about very much. The part where Swan Creek meets the Maumee River, an area called the Middle Grounds. It was the site of one of the first Native American settlements. It was the site of the first French trading post. It was the site of a British fort, an American fort, and eventually it's where the canal met the creek to meet the river, to meet the rails, an area we call the Middle Grounds. Today, you guys know it as the headquarters of Owens Corning, down by the ballpark. Back in the day, this was the beating heart of the city, where everything about the Toledo economy was originally built. So today, we're going to talk about the foundations of industrial Toledo.
Hey everybody. So the Middle Grounds, I keep coming back to it, right? The Middle Grounds might be the most important real estate in this city over the years. Maybe not right now, but over the years. So when we look back, little cracking voice there. The city's formed in 1837, and it starts growing really fast in its first 30 years. And I know you guys don't think 30 years is a short time, but I'm telling you, historically, 30 years is a blink of an eye. And by the time we get to 1868, just 31 years after the city has been founded, our old friend Jessup Wakefield Scott writes a pamphlet that gets published around the country called Toledo, the Future Great City of the World. Jessup Scott believes that in the next 100 years, which would have been by 1968, which is in your grandparents' lifetime probably, Jessup Scott believes that Toledo is going to be the center of the world economy. Why does he believe this? Well, it's not because he's a homer and it's not because he's crazy. Jessup Scott believes that if you look through all of world history, the center of progress has always shifted west. Okay? So you start in, Baghdad and move to Jerusalem and then to Istanbul and then to Rome and then to London and then to New York. And Jessup Scott believes it's coming in to the middle of America next. And he believes this because Toledo is a transportation hub, as we talked about in the last video. The rails, the canals, the ships, they all come together here. And in one perspective, Scott is not, well, from a lot of perspectives, Scott is not crazy. If you wanted to really ship a bunch of stuff out of anywhere in the Great Lakes region, Toledo makes about as much sense as anywhere else. Because we are on the Great Lake that is the second to the east, okay, being Lake Ontario being the furthest east, and we're the westernmost city. So anything coming from the western United States could come into Toledo on rails, be put on a ship, and then scoot right out the St. Lawrence Seaway to world markets and stuff, or onto the Erie Canal to head down to New York. He's not nuts. And a lot of what Jessup Scott is envisioning Toledo as, a city with a finance industry, a city where lots of things are manufactured, where food products come in, etc. What he's envisioning is Chicago. But he didn't imagine Chicago getting as big as it was going to get. Now, there's where you can say, well, Jessup, maybe you should have looked at the fact that at this point, Chicago is already 10 times larger than Toledo. Maybe Chicago is the future great city of the world here. But Jessup Scott, bless his soul, believes Toledo, future great city of the world. Now, what are some of the things that start happening that make Toledo maybe not the great city of the world, but a great city in the world? Well, first we look at infrastructure, which is something nobody likes to pay for and everybody likes to use. Infrastructure is good roads. Infrastructure is good schools. It's running water. And the idea that when you flush the toilet, the boo-boo goes away. Infrastructure is electricity that's reliable and cheap. Infrastructure is all the basic stuff you need to have an economy. And around the time that Jessup Scott is writing Future Great City of the World, Toledo is investing hard in infrastructure. So 1865, they build the first Cherry Street Bridge, connecting the east side and west side for the first time. Before that, you had to get on a little boat, and a little ferry boat would take you across from the east to the west. That's no way to run a city. You need bridges to connect a city. If you look at this picture, this is down by the Westminster Gym, and this is, so we're looking over, this is where the Martin Luther King Bridge is today. Right here is like where International Park is, where they have those long skinny boats that they row crew in. The new Marina Lofts project would be right over here on this side, and this picture is probably being taken, actually I'm sure it's being taken from a railroad overpass that used to be right next to the McDonald's that's on Front Street over on the east side. And we're looking over at the west, so like Channel 11 would be right here. Sorry, I spend way too much time trying to explain what's in old pictures. By the 1870s, Toledo gets its first waterworks to provide fresh water, and that was located down in the south near Broadway. Another thing that's happening during this time that's necessary to have a great economy, immigration. And basically speaking, you have three waves of immigration that have crashed through Toledo by the time we get to like 1875, 1880. In the 1830s, it's the Irish, which I talked about already. In the 30s and 40s, the Irish are coming over to dig the canal. In the 40s and 50s, it's Germans. And the Germans are working on the docks. The Germans are building stuff. They're not doing the manual labor like the Irish, because most of the Germans that are coming over can read. And most of the Irish that were coming over were illiterate. So the Germans have better jobs, but not great jobs when they come over. And then the Germans that come over after the 1850s are basically not coming to the city. They're going out to the country to be farmers. The other group that you have come through at this time, by the 1860s and really in the 1870s, is the Polish. Now, this chart, I wish I could remember where I got this chart, because it's one of the greatest charts I've ever seen. It shows the growth in groups of different ethnic backgrounds in Toledo from 1870 to 1950. And I believe this tells so much of the Toledo story in one picture. So you got 1870, your Germans are the light blue, the Irish are the green, the Polish are yellow, I'm not sure why that is, the Hungarians are this darker blue, African Americans represented by the gray bar. So you see here, fairly significant Irish, but the Germans have taken over by 1870, and the Polish are just getting started, and there's a very tiny African American community. If we just watch each bar separately, look how the Irish goes down, up, down to nothing by the time we get to 1950. The German bar goes up, up, stagnant, down, down, almost gone by 1950. The Polish bar, virtually nothing, whoop, whoop, whoa, the Polish bar gets really big there for a while. The Hungarian bar is at 0 in 1870, 0 in 1880, a little bit in 1890, and then that Hungarian population really starts to climb by 1950. It's one of the only European ones that's growing in 1950. And then the real story, of course, is the African American story. African American story starts very small in 1870, very small in the 80s, still pretty small in the 90s, 1900 a little bit bigger, 10 a little bit bigger, and then for reasons we'll talk about when we get to this point in history, notice how just everything changes in 1920. All of the European sources go down, and the African American source triples, quadruples, gets a little bit bigger, doubles. Okay, that's the story of Toledo right there. And in a lot of ways, it's the story of the entire United States. Real quick about Germany and Poland. One of the things you have to understand is not that not all Germans are Germans and not all Polish are Polish. And you're like, huh? What? It's important to remember that German and Poland are... So, Poles don't only live in Poland and Germans don't only live in Germany. And I think I mentioned this when we talked about Native American nations once, that in the United States, we think of American and United States as exactly the same thing, because American is not an ethnic group, right? American is people who live in America. And that's what makes our country weird as heck, you guys. Like, other countries, it's not the same. Your nation and your state are two different things. Your nationality is your language and cultural group. Your state is the country that you live in. In the United States, we see ourselves kind of as 50 small states, none of which have a dominant ethnic group, all of which belong to this nationality called American. We are the weirdos here, not everybody else. So when we look over at this part of Central to Eastern Europe, super duper important to understand that there were Polish people who lived in Germany and German people who lived in Poland, and that was pretty much okay throughout history. And there were Russians who lived in Poland and Poles who lived in Russia. Poland, the country, has had its borders shift like nonstop for 300 years. And so when we look at American immigration, and especially when we look at those two critically important immigrant groups in Toledo, the Germans and the Poles, a lot of the people where they, on their records, it said they were German were really Polish. They came from the country of Germany, but they were Poles. Or they were people who, it said they were from Poland, but they were really Russians living in the Polish borders. This map might be super confusing, but what you see shaded in, that's what Poland was in 1939. And then you see the current borders outlined in red. The entire country, I'm sorry, I had it backwards. Outlined in red are the 1939 borders, and then the shaded in one is what Poland is today. And you see that the whole country just migrated west. Now, there's a lot of really complex stories behind that, but it's not like everybody just picked up and moved and said, well, let's move over to the left a little bit. It had to do with the geopolitics of the First World War, Second World War, and the Cold War. So some people were ethnic Poles living in Germany or Russia, so you'll find on somebody's birth certificate that they're Russian, and you're like, but Grandma Krasinski was Polish. Well, yeah, she was Polish, but that part of Poland was part of Russia at the time. Or you'll find something like, Grandpa Birnbaum was German, but it says here he came from Poland. Well, he did. It gets kind of confusing at this point in time. Okay, where they went. Where did these people go? A lot of these neighborhoods we've talked about already, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. The Irish came to the Old South End. As I told you, this church, Immaculate Conception, it looks a little bit different today because the original building had a fire and they kind of rebuilt with the same structure, same front walls, but the top looks quite different today. So the Old South End Irish neighborhood of Derby was basically along Broadway, south of the Anthony Wayne Trail, between the railroad tracks on the north and Danny Thomas Park on the south. And Immaculate Conception Church, the Derby Church, was founded in 1856, kind of the center of that community. The Germans went to that place called Lanks Hill that I've talked about before. Lanks Hill was basically south of Dorr, north of Hamilton, west of Collingwood, and east of Hoyt. Okay? And this was the historic German neighborhood that then becomes the historic African-American neighborhood a few years later, and part of it becomes the historic Polish neighborhood of Kuszwans a little later. The community for the Germans, there was Salem Lutheran Church, that was a German evangelical Lutheran church, and then Saints Peter and Paul, a church that still exists in South Toledo today, across the railroad tracks. And you can see Peter and Paul is right down here, 1866. Back then it was a short walk from Lanks Hill down. The other thing that was a big part of this community was something that was called Lanks Park, that is today City Park. And that's the City Park on Nebraska that is next to, is that the Riggs Funeral Home? It's next to one of the funeral homes down there in Nebraska. The Poles. Now, we'll get to talking about Kuszwans later, but the Legrinka neighborhood was the first one. That's the first Polish neighborhood formed in town. On the north end, centered around like a bullseye of LaGrange and Central. And the first church there was a little bit further down LaGrange, the old St. Hedwig's, which still stands down by Ohio Hardware. And you can see the Polish on here, right? You can see the Polish name. You can see the Latin, like Catholic churches use. And then you can also see that It says Regine Polonae, which basically means reign Poland, like the Polish people reign. This is a Polish church, and that's kind of a cool thing where you can see a little bit of our history still engraved in stone. Okay, so what we just talked about are land, labor, and capital. And if you've ever taken an economics class, those are the factors of production. That's what gives you the chance to have an economy. And by the time we get to 1880, Toledo has land, it has labor in all these immigrants, and now we're waiting on the capital. Okay, where is the capital going to come from? Where are the businesses, the investors, going to come from? Well, two of the first that are really important in the city. One is the Vulcan Iron Works. And the Vulcan Iron Works, as I understand it, are basically down where the Fifth Third Building and Imagination Station are today. Was this big iron smelting business that brought in iron on ships and then made like steam shovels and railroad equipment out of it. The other one that was the biggest factory and most important factory in Toledo in the late 1800s, even going into the 1900s, was the Milburn Wagon Company. And the Milburn Wagon Works was the world's largest producer of farm wagons. They had the world's largest factory. This factory was located, I'm going to try and show you on Google Earth in just a minute, but this factory was located near Swainfield Shopping Center. If you guys know where that viaduct is on Monroe Street, when you're coming out, like towards Monroe and Auburn, there's that viaduct, and just before the viaduct is like the Lucas County 911 Center, and that's where the Milburn Wagon Works was. And they exist through the 1900s. They actually built cars. They lasted into the car era. It was the first mechanized factory in Toledo that required low-skilled labor. It also brought the city the first and not the last factory neighborhood, factory town. The Auburndale neighborhood up there, near Auburn and Monroe, going down Milburn Avenue and all those other streets up there, that whole neighborhood was built for the workers at the factory so they could walk to work because you didn't have a car. Streetcars didn't run out that far. They built a neighborhood to support the factory. And so that neighborhood was sometimes called Wagon Works. It was more often called Auburndale. And it really was one of the most important early industrial neighborhoods in this city, going down towards Ottawa Park. Now, the next thing that happens is transformative for the city of Toledo. What you're looking at is a drawing in Findlay, Ohio, of pipes sticking out of the ground with fire shooting out of them. These are early street lights. Down in Findlay, Ohio in the 1880s. Now, they had found natural gas in Findlay like 20, 30 years earlier. But by the 1880s, they find this massive, massive natural gas pocket down by Findlay and BG. And they start tapping and piping and storing this natural gas. With piping that brings that natural gas up to Toledo, Toledo now has access to what they believed at the time was a limitless, clean-burning energy supply. Now, prior to this, if you wanted energy in Toledo, if you wanted to heat your house or bake a cake or anything else, you had to have wood or you had to have coal, okay? Now and yes, we have trees, but not enough to like fuel a city, trees. And coal, we don't have coal mines around here. You got to go down to southern Ohio to find coal mines. All of a sudden, now we have an energy source. And it's an energy source that burns really hot and really clean. Now, this is what is so cool. At exactly the same time, out by Sylvania, like out by Centennial Road in Sylvania and Sylvania Avenue going out there, all of a sudden they find these massive sandstone deposits underground, all right? They found them because they had started these quarries where they were trying to get like rocks to build houses from, but sandstone doesn't work real well that way. They find these massive sandstone deposits that are high in content of something called silica. And all of us right now should take a moment to say, thank you, glaciers. Thank you for what you did for us. The glaciers and the prehistoric age gave us all the decomposed matter that became natural gas and oil, and it gave us the sandstone that was rich in silica. And I want you to think for just a minute. What happens when you heat up sand? hopefully you are putting the picture together. When you superheat sand with a plentiful, clean-burning resource, with those silica sands that you have just west of town, you make glass. This is how we become the glass city. And Toledo starts marketing itself, saying to glass companies that already exist in the United States, you should come here. Move out of Connecticut. Move out of Massachusetts. You should come to Toledo because we have more fuel to superheat the sand, and we have the silica sand that you need. And so this works a little bit early. In the late 1870s, early 1880s, a few small glass makers start moving from the East Coast to Toledo. But the real transformative moment in this city's history is going to come in the middle of the 1880s, when there is a glass maker in Massachusetts who's looking for cheap raw materials because business is just too expensive on the East Coast and easy ways to transport his stuff to market. And when that guy comes to Toledo, things really start to change, and they change fast. Now, we're going to take a minute to just look at a couple satellite things regarding both the natural gas and the silica. But I am going to sign off and say thanks for sticking with me. Be well, and watch this thing real quick. Okay, so here we are back again with the satellite view, and you guys see here's our west end of Lake Erie. Down here is Findlay. Here's Bowling Green. There are natural gas wells all around here, and there are pipes taking that natural gas up to Toledo. Now, Sylvania's right out here. This is Central Avenue. Here's Sylvania Avenue. You take Sylvania Avenue way out. Right there's the mall. Here's going out past the mall and like Wildwood Park and the Boy Scout reservation and stuff. You take it under Route 23 and you get out here and you still find the remnants of those big stone quarries. How important was it out there? This is Silica Road, okay? Silica Road, named after this great stuff that they're finding. And these quarries, I hope I can do what I think I can do here. Yes, my friends, yes. We can get down in the quarry here a little bit and kind of look up. These are massive holes in the ground out in Sylvania. I mean, huge. If you've never been out there, it's well worth your time, because up at this end of the quarry, okay, Boyle, find it. All right, that's not it. Hold on, you guys. I'm so sorry. Here I am trying to be all slick, and once again, not slick, Boyle, not slick. Yeah, here it is. This is a place where you can park. It's a park in Sylvania, and you can walk back in here a little bit, where you can like dig for fossils. So there are a lot of fossils in this old residue from the old quarry, and there's a walking path that goes back there. But they bring scoopfuls of the stuff from the quarry over here, and kids can dig through and look for fossils. I've taken my kids there a few times. It's a big hit. Centennial Quarry is right up here where you can go swimming during the summer sometimes. But I mean, just look at just the massive size of these holes in the ground. And let's try and get right down there on the road and look up. And again, guys, this is no more than 20 minutes from where any of us live. So yeah, this is what it looks like in the bottom of these quarries, where they were mining out the stuff that made Toledo the glass city. I just think, I'm sorry, I'm such a dork, but I just think this stuff is super, super cool, you guys. So anyways, I'm not going to waste a lot more of your time. I hope you found this interesting. I hope now when somebody says, why is Toledo the glass city, you're going to be like, listen, I got an answer for that. So I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care. Bye.